Today's a big day. I have made it more easily than I thought to 10 years of sobriety. Yeah, two full hands of sober. Wild. And it's been really interesting. I've been trying to reflect on it, and there's something that's been just challenging for me to really get the traction on it. I think one, because this is my life. I'm so close to my life. I'm in my life. This is what I'm doing now. It kind of feels sometimes as if like, could it have been otherwise? And then at times it feels like when I look back, I'm like, did that even happen? Did I make it up? Which is a dangerous thought. And then I think I close my eyes and it does not take me but a split second to then, I can fully remember where I was 10 years ago. So painful and clueless and actually absolutely terrified. And I think it's really important to reflect, especially when it's hard to. I don't think that it's great to be dwelling in things, but I think it's really important that we keep a relationship with the places in which we've been and the people who we were. And while I'm a different person now, that part of me is very much still alive. I see her in many different ways. She comes out in many costumes and, does her dance in different ways. But in thinking about what to share today, I think I've talked about my recovery journey in different ways. I have lots of podcasts out there where I tell like my full story, so I didn't really want to do that. I think I just wanted to focus on a little bit of what it was like at the very end and then what the recovery was like. So I asked on Instagram the questions that people had, and that will help me as I go through. So I'm going to share a little bit about what it was like at the end, and then we'll focus on the recovery piece. So I was not a casual drinker. I was not even a heavy partier. I was a heavy partier for a long time, but then there's another level that you get to where you are just a full-blown alcoholic, full-blown addict. And I had been at that point for quite some time. Everybody knew, besides me. I fully refused to admit it. I was so deep in my denial that I was having fun. Everyone needed to leave me alone. The fact that I kept ending up in jail or rehab or hospital was just bad luck. And like people shouldn't, whatever. I could explain away anything. And trust me, it was very obvious and colorful what was going on. Like, so the things that but I really believed them. Of course, there was a little piece of me that when I got really quiet would know that I was in trouble. And I very quickly would shut that up. I would shut it up with being busy. I would shut it up with partying. And the most way that I shut it up was with more drugs and alcohol. Because there would always be these little waves that would happen of where it would be, this exuberance and this fun and this, this levity, which lasts shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter amount of time. So it got really hard to maintain the fact that I was having fun when I was getting hardly very little lift anymore. And it was pretty much only digging myself out of a hole. So the way that tolerance works is that, in the beginning, there's an excellent little YouTube clip called Nuggets. And it's a little animation that really speaks to what addiction is like. And it's a little bird. And every time he finds a little golden ball on the ground, and then he finds the golden ball and he sucks it up through his nose and he goes, whee! And he goes up really, really high, and then he like lands very gently. And then he bounces around, and the little bird finds another ball and goes, he sucks it up and he goes, whee! And when he lands, he just like barely hits and then bounces. So you kind of see where this is going. He keeps going along, and every time he finds a little ball, he goes up a little bit less, bounces a little bit harder, and it goes on and on and on until at the very, very end, he's like barely dragging himself around, and he finds the thing, and he'll sip up the gold ball, and just nothing happens. Like it begins to stop working. And that's the tragedy, is that something that we build such a tolerance to, and you need more and more and more. It's like you need to put more and more and more to fill that hole that keeps getting bigger, and it continues to not be fillable. Gabor Mate says that there's something to the effect of like, there's a point where the addict is no longer trying to get high. They're only trying to stave off the pain of withdrawal. And I would say that is the pain of withdrawal mixed with the shame of what's actually happening and the chaos that you've caused yourself and like everyone who loves you. The two of those things together, for me, made it nearly impossible, because I couldn't look at it. I didn't want to feel that. I didn't want to feel the shame, and I didn't want to feel the withdrawal. You know, so when both of those come together, it's too much. It's too much. And it was too much for me for a really long time. I very clearly knew, and everybody very clearly knew, that I had a problem for a really long time. I think I went to my first kind of rehab when I was like 16 or something. I went to my last one when I was probably 29. So there's a long thing in there, which of course it wasn't fully crash course the whole time or rock bottom, but I hit mini rock bottoms. I was like this the whole time, and it was very clear quite soon that it was going to be a long, bumpy ride, and I was not clear to my inner self, but it was apparent. I was running from that truth for a really long time. In the very end, without getting into all the gory details, but in the very end, everyone had cut me off. My family had stopped talking to me. They had prior been sending me in and out of detoxes, in and out of treatments, picking me up from the other end of the country when, you know, some colorful thing hit the fan and I couldn't find my car and I've lost my job and the boy left and I was like a puddle somewhere in some place. Or like one time my dad had to bail me out of jail in California and he had to like fly out from Oklahoma. Or there'd be these big like triage missions, you know, which just multiplied the shame, the thing that I couldn't look at, of like, look at what is happening, and I would want to forget about what was happening. The situations I would get myself in, the ways I would get myself out of them, the manipulation that I had to do to survive. It becomes a survival thing. It is absolutely not a choice. It becomes a way to survive. And it's so hard to surface, because to get clear about what is happening means you have to get clear also about what has happened. So I just really want to emphasize that there is a metric shit ton of shame that keeps people from being able to even look at it for a moment, on top of all the physicality. So this is very much a physical issue. Like my body needed booze to stay alive. Like it needed, the tolerance was so high, I needed to keep drinking or I couldn't function. It like the medicine, what was once medicine becomes the poison, but for that poison, I need more of that, more of it. Very cyclical, crazy loop. And then the emotional component of that as well. So two things working with. But yeah, in the end, I had been cut off from my family. I had been kicked out of some sober living places. I had been already to treatment, 6-7 times. They were trying to get me into a last treatment, but the treatment centers wouldn't take me, regarding my history. I've been blacklisted from the Austin ambulance. That's right, because I used to call the ambulance because I would want to go and detox. I would want to go and I'm done and I want to detox, and they would give me benzodiazepam, which is what they give to help try to come off of alcohol, because it was so painful without it. Like I couldn't detox without it. I would have seizures. That's the body building the tolerance so high that if you just stop, your body goes into shock. So I knew that I needed to go into the hospital. So I kept calling for help. And they eventually had to blacklist me because every time I would show up, I would end up leaving. I would end up ripping my IVs out and leaving at some point if it started to hurt too bad. My friends wouldn't talk to me. I checked myself out of detox with another patient. All of these colorful, crazy things that were happening. At one point, I had roommates that they had to leave because I refused to leave. And people would have to come and check on me because I was really a danger to myself. It was bad. It was really bad. A morning till night search for alcohol, for booze, to figure out how I was going to make it through the day. And the first two things that I would think about when I would wake up is, where am I and what have I done? And where is the alcohol? In the very end, heroin entered. And, you know, it wasn't fun. We weren't partying anymore in the end. I had linked up with some people that I had been in treatment with, that I had been in recovery with, that had also relapsed. So this is the challenge for those of you in recovery that are going like to treatment, getting sober in a place where you went to treatment at, which can be great because there's a beautiful community, but also the people who relapse then kind of get together. And then it's like, you're not with normal people, you're with like the real deal. And you get a lot of like real deal addicts and alcoholics together. It's a cause for trouble. So there's that. And because we need to be around other people who sign off on our bullshit, really. Because I couldn't drink around anybody else. I couldn't use around anybody else who wouldn't be like, what the fuck? Like, no, this is not normal. So I needed to be around people who were like doing it with me. You know? So that's how we get in these like vacuums. So in the end, I was in one of those. It was pretty dark. It was really dark. I've talked about some of the more the gorier details in some of the podcasts if you want to listen to that. But lots of everything. And luckily the heroin kind of brought me to my knees pretty quickly. And I had like a little mini stroke overdose thing. I still don't know exactly what happened. But I essentially was kind of standing during the injection, and my knees just crumpled. And I was trying to tell the people I was with that there's something wrong. There's something wrong. And my words were just coming out like, I couldn't speak. And I just hit the ground. And I came to, I don't know how long later everyone had left, because that's what happens. Nobody wants to be, you know, could be dead, don't know. So wake up alone. And I have to hitchhike across of Austin to get to this little room that I had rented from this like old man in East Austin. It was just this shit situation that was across from a liquor store. And I had went to the liquor store and bought a bunch of booze. And I think I probably had some pills, and I was going to have to nurse myself back to health. That's what it did for me. Like, that's literally what I think. If I'm sick, I need to have more to make myself feel better, because that's what worked. But my brain was electrocuted. This was a different thing, not just like a hangover, you know, not just a normal withdrawal either. So I go into this little room. I've shut myself in there, and I just, you know, start putting everything in my system, and nothing's happening. Nothing's changing. The way that I feel is not changing. And that terrifies me, because this is the only thing I know how to do to change the way that I feel. Two things came about. Two things that I remembered that I'd been told before. And one was, I was in and out of AA meetings a lot. So I was in this AA meeting, they have little cliches that they share, and damn it if they aren't true, because they are. But often they would say, some days it's just not going to work anymore. Some days it's just not going to work anymore. And I still don't actually know what they mean by that. But that day, what I took that to mean was that someday the substance isn't going to work anymore. When I think they actually probably meant someday, like the whole thing is not going to work anymore. The way you're doing what you're doing is not going to work anymore. But I took it literally as like, one day it's not going to work anymore. And I was trying to put it in and nothing was helping. And oh my God, because if this doesn't work, I don't know what to do. The other thing that I remembered, thankfully, that came into my head at a treatment center that I was in probably 3-4 months prior. I'm so happy that I had this conversation with a woman who was a tech there. And I remember asking her, I never wanted to get sober, by the way. I wasn't somebody who was attempting to get sober. I was so lost in my denial and delusion. I wanted everyone to leave me alone. I was fine. But anyway, I asked her and I go, how did you do it? Like, I really just couldn't even fathom why anyone would want to, much less how. And she said to me, you know, one day you're going to realize that you can be high or you can be happy. And that even though they used to go together, they're never going to go together anymore. And I remembered that day. And those two things combined, I felt like so defeated. Because prior, the only thing I needed to do was to get away from you, to get out of this place, to get the new partner, or to move, or to get the booze, or to get my parents off my back, or to something needed. There's just always something, and then it would be fine. But it was this deep realization that it wasn't fine, and it wasn't ever going to be fine, and that this wasn't ever going to work. And like, talk about ripping off a Band-Aid that I had like soldered onto me. It was barely hanging, but damn when it peels off. And I think it was that day, maybe it was the next day, I called the sober living place that I had been kicked out of not long before. And I told them, can I come back? And there was absolutely no reason why they should have let me back in there, because I endangered everyone who lived there by having booze. I also didn't have any money because everyone had cut me off. I had no money. And typically they only let people in to sober living who have recently came out of treatment center, because that's the best chance of you know, they're going to take you off the street. But there was one high risk room in there. One high risk room, meaning they'll take somebody off the street, and they have one scholarship to let me in. And the house mother there really went to bat for me and let me in. She shouldn't, I mean, I'm glad she did, but logically she shouldn't have. But I was so known to never say I needed help, that when she heard that, much less like when it came out of my own mouth, she was like, okay. So she had said like to come on Wednesday or something. And I was like, fuck, I have like 3 days left. I survived. I did what I had to do to survive during those 3 days. And then I showed up on a Tuesday night. And I came with my bag, and I was at the door, and I said, I will sleep on your couch. And she let me in. And when I walked through that threshold, I could feel my body, like my nervous system drop. It's like I entered this space of safety. I don't know what it was. I had been in many sober livings. I hated them. But something about walking in here, it felt held all of a sudden. And it was because I was allowing it to. When before I was constantly in resistance. One of my friends who was the owner of one of the treatment centers that I went to that ended up as a friend said that you were like trying to throw a tiger into a pool for 3 months. And that's how I was. So resistant. Absolutely could not hear anything else. So thick this bubble of denial was, like thick bubble around me. I was so protected inside while I'm inside this bubble just killing myself. But no one from the outside could get to me. And it's like that bubble of delusion got thin that night. That bubble got really thin. It was able to be pierced. Or it was at least thin enough for me to realize I'm screwed. Like thank goodness when we finally realize that there is no other way, or we finally realize that this is what it is. That painful truth continues to be a painful truth throughout my life in many different ways. When I find myself in resistance to things, creating stories about things, denying things, and then eventually you come face to face with it and you're like, this is what it is. Andrea Gibson says that even when the truth isn't hopeful, the telling of it is. So it's like, even though I would have given anything to not have that, to not have had that be my truth, the only way that anything could have ever changed is by me speaking it. It was a very unhopeful truth. It was a very painful truth, but not until I could speak it and say I needed help could I have done anything. And then turns out things got really hopeful, but not in the beginning. This is actually, like, my tears are actually what I was really wanting, because sometimes when I was reflecting, so it was actually 2 days ago, my 10 days, I was trying to reflect on it and I was like, oh, I can't quite feel it. Like, it feels like so far away. It feels like so long ago. I couldn't quite get traction on it. But then it's always so amazing. There'll be something that will just click and I'm like, poof. Yes. It's important to let ourselves continue to be affected. And no, I don't think about it very often anymore. And I don't dwell on it. Like, who knew? But it's so important to revisit and to remember. Damn, it was hard. Because then we can see the space between. 10 years. You could have never told me 10 years ago that any part of the beauty of what has transpired since was possible. I would have called bullshit. Like, absolutely. I say sometimes that, like, if somebody could have said, Cole, you can have anything you want. You could have anything you want. What would you want? And I would have sold myself so short because I just not even understanding what was possible. And trust me, it did not happen very quickly. But none of it could have happened until you lay the foundation of self-honesty. So I stayed at that house. I don't know what else I needed to be at that place. I really am a strong proponent of sober living houses. Not all of them are created equally. Same with treatment centers. So in the end, I didn't go to a treatment center. I didn't get sober from a treatment center in the end, but it was a sober living center. I got I didn't have any money. There was some thing that was like 30 days for free at Wanderlust Yoga in Austin. And I just started going to yoga every single day, every single day, every single day. Going to meetings, going to yoga, coming back home for curfew, going to meetings, going to yoga, coming back home from curfew. Every day, hating life. Like, I'm just not happy about it. I had like 3 roommates. I was not happy, but I was just doing it. I was like trying to put a new pattern in. I didn't know why. I didn't know what for. I had no idea what it was going to be like to be sober and clear in a world, which I had been not clear in since I was about 14. It's 29. It was terrifying. It felt like I had pulled my skin off and I was like walking around raw. It was, part of it felt disassociated, like I wasn't almost even there, just going through the motions. I didn't think I was ever going to have any like animation in my life. I was going to ever like be able to have passion or laughter or excitement or joy. I didn't know if anything was going to happen. I just felt like a shell of a person. And luckily I just kept doing it. And people would tell me, just keep coming back. Keep coming back. And they, again, these cliches in AA, keep coming back. Don't stop before the magic happens. Don't give up before the magic happens. And all of it is true. All of it is true. I don't go to AA anymore. I'm so grateful for it though. I have all kinds of stories with me and my battle with how much trying to fight with AA back in the day, but so grateful for it whenever I was again able to release into it and find some community and find some spaces where I could speak about the position I was in. Because we have some deep shame, some deep stories, some things that you just don't talk about at a normal dinner table. But when you're around people that are in similar experiences, that, you know, you can share your deep wounds, share your deep shame, the things that you are not proud of, and they're like, yep, me too, or something similar. That's healing. So beyond the dogma, to be able to be in community with people who that you can be your true authentic self is, however ratted and torn that is, and to people to be like, I see you. That is so necessary. Things eventually began to shift. I began to relearn myself. I'm still learning myself, but begin to like re-put things together, rediscover, sift through the rubble of the mass chaos that I had made and see what was left. Pema Chodron says that the real work begins with when we work with what remains. It's work enough to drop the substance trust. But then the real work is, what do you do now? Because that was the delusion. That's what kept me from seeing what was really there. What really had to happen. It's not a one and done. There's a big process after it. And I was very lucky to connect with my yoga practice, to have incredible therapists, to explore breath work, to be in community, to have support. My friends, my family came back to me a little while after I, had a little bit of proof of concept of me doing something different. Relationships begin to heal. The inner one is healing, always in process. I think I'm going to answer the questions on another video, but I want to just finish this by saying, you do not have to know where you're headed to do something different. You do not have to know what you want to change. I had no clue what I wanted. I did not want sobriety. I just knew eventually in the end I didn't want to die. It's not what I was after. It's not why I started this thing. I started drinking and using drugs because I felt expansive. I felt like me. I felt like I filled my skin out. It's like that little Nuggets, that little bird who was like, woo! Like that's what it felt like. And in the end, it was that trudge. And I'm very fortunate and very lucky to have had a second chance, because so many people who wanted it more than I did not make it. This is not something that many people get out of, especially that deep in. And I didn't know what I wanted or what would happen or what was on the other side. I just walked into the liminal space with ground not there and just went forward. Not with a good attitude about it, not happy about it even, but just doing something different. The ground eventually places itself under your feet. What a trip. What a trip. And life has gotten so good. And I never, ever would have imagined that I wouldn't spend all day, every day trying to find booze. Or if I wasn't drinking, I could have never imagined that I wouldn't spend all day, every day thinking about it. I thought I would always be thinking about it. And it goes away. Sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, but it shifts. We repattern, we put in new algorithms, we put in new data points into our system, and we do the unfamiliar thing until it becomes familiar. We do the harder thing until it becomes the easier thing. And there's so many tools that can support us along the way. Our yoga practice being one, the breath, the movement, the inquiry, learning about the nervous system, getting to know the inner parts of self. The Buddhist philosophy has been hands down so powerful. And to each their own as well. But to know that it's not formulaic, it's different for everyone. And you don't have to know where you're going. Just keep doing the next thing. So 10 years. Unbelievable. Truly unbelievable. And I'm so freaking grateful. Charles Bukowski says something, who is also an alcoholic, says something like, I'm just as amazed as anyone else that I've gotten from there to here. And that feels really true. I am just as amazed as anybody else that I have gotten from there to here. And I couldn't be happier about it. It has been a trip, and it still is. And I'm grateful. Thanks for listening to all of that. And I think I'll do another video and answer some of these questions around what the recovery piece was like, what was hard, what was supportive, and how I've navigated it. So if you're interested in that, then pop over to the other video. Thank you. If you need any help, please reach out for support. My Emerge program is epic, but don't even worry about the program. There's some resources on there as well. There's online meetings. There's books that have been supported to me. There is Buddhist resources on there that I would recommend, all recovery focused. There's so much more support out there these days that you can go into different angles, and there's different nuances to find something that fits better. And thank goodness that the recovery scene is getting to be more populated with diversity. There's many different ways to explore now, many different ways to find clarity in support. It can't be done alone. And this is, it is a life-taking, life-threatening disease, or not disease, as another talk, experience. But so do reach out.